Even the very word music suggests this spiritual dimension. Its etymological root, muse, is the name of the spirit beings, daughters of Zeus, who the ancient Greeks felt were responsible for the inspiration of all art. Over 3,000 years later, this connection between muses, or spirits, and music hasn't just survived, it's thrived. The world of popular music virtually teems with artists who believe they are channelers for spiritual forces, guiding lights to the undiscovered of our subconscious. Often these spirits are credited with helping inspire or even compose a particular song. John Lennon, for example, has stated, "When the real music comes to me, it has nothing to do with me, because I'm just a channel. It's given to me, and I transcribe it like a channel."
Within the band, we said there is a fifth member, a mystical member, yeah. We've always said there's something looking over us.
And the only way that I can describe that, probably in its best, the best way for me is that when we were playing our first songs together, and especially our first album, you know, the first 3 albums, for instance, we would literally show up in a room, and it was almost as if the songs were already written. That's why I like to call Black Sabbath a phenomenon, rather than a band. Although it is a rock and roll band, there's a phenomena involved there where that stuff just comes from somewhere, and it just so happened that we happen to be the ones that it came to.
I'm very aware that when I write a good song, I'm just acting as like a messenger. It comes from a higher source. You know, I'm not so egotistical that I think that I've done this all on my own. I'm very aware that there's a higher source sort of guiding me through this, and I'm just acting as a messenger.
A lot of the songs were written in about 15 minutes to 45 minutes, just really quickly. Glenn and I in the room, very stream of consciousness, as though many times we felt that
Elvis would acknowledge that the strange powers that he'd wielded over his audiences were occultic powers that he'd received from the spirit world. Elvis as a child believed that he was being guided by the voice of his brother Jesse, who had died at birth, but later admitted that he was being used by a hierarchy of spirit beings. His close friend Larry Geller wrote that Elvis believed that he was working under the aegis of these masters, that they had helped him. Elvis admitted, "I always felt an unseen hand behind me. I heard that same voice and thought it was my brother. That's what I thought. I heard this guidance guiding me all my life. That's why I'm here and why I'm doing this. This didn't just happen. This wasn't mere happenstance." Author Gary Herman stated that Elvis, quote, recognized the devil's part in his success. My little reign of misery. Well, I'm evil. So don't you mess around.
A few different ways to look at backwards masking, and there's different types of what people call backwards masking. I'm not talking really about backwards masking, I'm talking really about backwards messages. In fact, one way to do it, which wouldn't require demons or higher intelligences to intercede, would be just to take straight words, take 7 or 8 words in a song, and reverse them. And then when you played it backwards, you would hear those words. But when you heard it forwards, what would you hear? You'd hear something backwards. It wouldn't make sense. So when people talk about how backwards masking is done in the studio, yeah, that kind of backwards masking is done in the studio. No problem. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about when you hear music and lyrics forward, and then you hear those same lyrics backwards, and it's a message forward, and those same words are a message backwards. Okay? And we're not talking about 1 or 2 words. We're talking about sometimes over 15 words straight. We're talking on Stairway to Heaven right around 30 words. Okay? And we're not only talking about that, we're talking about a song that wasn't engineered to be heard backwards, but came right from the spirit world automatically. Okay? And then we're talking about, if you wanted to make lyrics backwards on a song, you're going to mess up that song forward pretty bad, right? Well, Stairway to Heaven is the most popular song in rock and roll.
Led Zeppelin's Robert Plant felt that their most popular song, Stairway to Heaven, was given in much the same way. I was holding a paper and pencil, and all of a sudden my hand was writing out words. There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying a stairway to heaven.
And she's buying a stairway to heaven.
I just sat there and looked at the words, and then I almost leapt out of my seat.
And it makes me wonder.
Page's fascination with Crowley led many to believe he was into black magic himself.
I think he was absolutely fascinated with the man and the knowledge of the will. I don't think, I mean, you know, he owned a lot of manuscripts, and he bought the Inverness Castle. That was also Crowley's. And I think with it, he had purchased a lot of manuscripts. And at one point, he had a bookstore in England, an occult bookstore.
In an interview with Rolling Stone, Santana was more specific concerning the identity of this supernatural entity, identifying him as Metatron, the architect of physical life. His personal studio, a place he calls church, features candles, the word Metatron spelled out in intricately painted picture letters on the floor, and a yellow legal pad Santana uses to record the spirit's messages when they come to him like a fax machine.
First of all, I'd like to thank Satan. I'd like to thank Satan. Thanks, Satan. Satan.
I'd like to say that the main thing about country music is I love to sing it, and there's a lot of people who love to hear country music.
And you take, for instance, like Loretta Lynn. She says on national television, and I have the data on it, that I heard it myself. She said that she was made successful in her singing career by a dear friend of hers that was the same age as she, and died when she was 18 years of age. And Loretta was trying to get into the singing world, you know, but she says, I had no success at all. Until one night I was sitting in bed reading a book. And she says, who walks right through the wall but my friend? The spirit of my friend. And she says, Loretta, I'm going to make you a very famous person in singing Western country music. And I will be with you all the time. Trust me. And she says, she had a big concert once, and she was coming down with this bad cold. And she thought that her voice was going to give. She talked to her spirit and felt that she was going to be helped. And she got on the stage, and she started to sing, and right in the middle of where she really needed the power, power at all. And her spirit friend tapped her on the shoulder and said, and started to sing for her. She said her voice went through me, the power. He said the supposed spirits of the dead that you're talking with are demon spirits.
Now, one of the closest friends that I got during that time that I attained was a man named David Crosby. Crosby, Still, Nash & Young. I saw David the day before Christmas last year, talked with him. I got him away from this witch that he had with him. He told her to go shopping. We were in West Hollywood, and I was witnessing around to people I knew. We went off in this store, and we started talking. I said, David, I'd like to ask you a couple questions. I said, I already know the answers, but I've been gone for 5 years. I'd like to know if certain things are still the way they were when I left. I said, now I'll have to explain some of this when I'm done, because you're not going to understand it all unless you know something about music. I said, do they still take the master to the temple room? Dave said, yeah. I said, do they still have the coven conjure demons into the master? He said, of course. I said, now, I got to know something. What's the main reason for rock music? He said, come on, Lance, you know what the reason is. I said, please, David, I don't want to guess. Tell me what the main reason is. He says, the same as when you were in, so that we can place spells on people that we couldn't cast spells upon. I'll explain what that means in a minute. I said, okay, one last thing. I've been hearing that you must be an initiated witch now to get a record contract. He said, that's right. He says, many of us that weren't total witches have to be witches now in order to produce music. After it's been recorded, it's taken in. This is why a master's cut months in advance before it's released. On the full moon, it's taken in to a temple room about the size of this auditorium that is in every one of the major music companies, behind locked doors up in the executive office. And it's placed on an altar sitting in the north of the room, and a pentagram engraved in the floor. And 13 hand-chosen witches and wizards and a coven come in and conjure a principality or a power up, usually Regia or something like that, and order him to tell the demons under him to follow every record and every tape coming off of that master. That's too hard for you to believe? I'm sorry. That's why they do it.
And more, much more than this, I did it my way.
Hailed as one of history's Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, a Freemason himself, composed a symphony, which was an open display of Freemasonry. The symphony is based on a story taken from Egyptian mythology of Isis and Osiris. The pagan rites of ancient Egyptian mythology form, through the Kabbalah, one of the fundamental aspects of Freemasonry.
It is hard to overestimate the impact that the Beatles had on the world at large, as youth by the millions were given a form of emotional shock treatment.
They influenced everything that I've ever done.
I even remember, growing up hearing Beatles songs, and all their songs are timeless.
They built the structure for rock and roll.
Beatles actually were bringing everybody along with them on their voyage of their discovery.
Beatles went out and took the world by storm.
I grew up with them. They helped us grow up. They got me arrested 3 or 4 times.
I think they did a lot for society.
Those songs are in my memory banks I think they're actually my genetic material.
All-time favorite musical group.
Beatles.
Go back and listen to Sgt. Pepper's. They were brilliant.
Sgt. Pepper changed the world.
You notice that, again, there's an audience that is there. Ringo Starr made a statement about it. He said that they are people that they highly admired and respected. And in the upper left-hand corner, you notice there's a bald-headed man. That man just so happens to be a guy named Aleister Crowley.
The Beatles also placed a picture of occultist William Burroughs, who claimed to have become demon-possessed after killing his wife on the Sgt. Pepper's album. Also making the cast was the most popular starlet of the 1960s, Jane Mansfield. Mansfield was a high priestess in Anton LaVey's Church of Satan. Mansfield admitted to using her Satanism to both seduce and gain worldwide fame. The Beatles also placed a slew of Eastern gurus on the album. Incredibly, one of the people who was to be pictured on the album as part of the Beatles Club was none other than Adolf Hitler. Hitler was yanked presumably because he was considered too controversial to appear on the album. Hitler's picture can be seen on the sidelines just prior to the shooting of the album cover. It has been well documented that Nazism was rooted in the occultic teachings of Madame Blavatsky and others. Aleister Crowley claimed that Hitler was his disciple and was seeking to implement the teachings of the Book of the Law through his policies of the triumph of the will. And of course, as we have noted on the top left, you find the picture of none other than Aleister Crowley.